It's the future, don't hit the snooze. AI is here giving humans the boost. Team Humans rolling, brains in the game with Dan Turchin. Y'all remember the name. People laying in the mix, no stopping the flow. Better work, better life, yeah, we're ready to go. Robots and humans, a collab, you know. Okay, let's start the show.
This is Dan Turchin from AI and the Future of Work. Welcome to this month's special compilation episode. We're bringing back 6 great former guests who published popular books about how AI is redefining humans at work, all focused on the shift from AI to improve efficiency to how AI helps employees find purpose and meaning. As always, we're using 11 Labs to digitize my voice for this compilation. The Real Me reviewed and approved the content and, of course, approved the digital twin. For decades, The Economist taught us that work was about maximizing output. But as AI takes over mundane tasks, it is forcing us to ask a more important, more profound question: what makes us uniquely human? In this episode, you'll hear from authors who argue that the future of work isn't about competing with algorithms. It's about how we use technology to increase our capacity for trust, express our vulnerability, and discover meaning. Let's begin with Bernard Marr, futurist and best-selling author of Generative AI in Practice. In this conversation from April to 2024, Bernard reflects on why he consciously decided not to use AI to write his book. He explains how delegating routine tasks to machines frees us up to explore our human superpowers like empathy, rational thinking, and compassion.
When these machines are augmenting and sometimes replacing or replicating things that we thought were innate to the human experience, what's left that only humans can do?
Yeah, so again, I see all of this through a very optimistic lens, and that there are clearly risks and downsides that come with all of this. But I believe that generative AI will make our world more human, and the truly human skills and the human capabilities that make us truly human, these human superpowers that we have, they will become more valuable. And what we need to do is we need to be able to delegate things to AI and work effectively alongside AI. So we pass on the things that humans shouldn't really be wasting their amazing potential on. A very simple example, when I write an article for Forbes, for example, I have to capitalize every letter in every subheadline. But this is not how I write. When I write, I just type in, and there's no capital letters in any headlines, only the very first word. So once I finished my article, I then have to go through this and literally capitalize every single letter. And this is a waste of my time. Now I can give this to ChatGPT saying, hey, capitalize every word in the subheadline, and it does it in an instant. On a much bigger level, if you are a radiographer or radiologist in a hospital, in the past, your job was to spend 8 hours a day looking at CT scans and X-ray images to determine, is there pre-cancer cells somewhere in the breast tissue? Is there a broken bone? And so on. And nowadays, these machines come with the ability to do this analysis already. And you think, is it really the best use of human capabilities to sit there and review scans? And also there are problems with this, because as humans, we are tired sometimes, we miss things, we have biases. So if someone has a full body CT scan and you say, okay, I need to check whether their vertebra in their back is broken or not, our human bias will be to look only for the break. But the CT scan might have picked up lots of other secondary or tertiary diagnoses. The AI, therefore, can do a lot of this better. I remember I took my son to the hospital because we suspected that he broke a bone in his hand. And so they had an X-ray, and then the doctor came back saying, you can see he has a little hairline fracture in the middle of his hand. But the AI is also suggesting that he broke part of his finger as well. And this is something, and he was saying, we can't actually see this on the X-ray as humans, but the AI thinks there's a break. So you think, okay, now we're at a level where the AI is almost better than a human at diagnosing scans. So what does this mean for radiologists? We still need them. And they will hopefully have a chance to spend more time with patients, hopefully spend more time on doing research, on furthering the field, on making radiology better in the future, even more capable, build the AI systems that are even more capable. And so for me, lots of jobs will move to a much more higher level. And what will become more important, and I actually wrote an entire book on this called Future Skills, because I have 3 children between the ages of 18 and 12. And I worry about what does this all mean? And very often when I give keynotes, one of the first questions I get at the end is, how is this going to transform our jobs, and what skills will we need in the future? So for me, beyond this ability to work alongside AIs and delegate work to AIs, it is the things that make us truly human that machines can't replicate yet. So it's creativity, complex problem solving, strategic thinking, interpersonal communication, and empathy, and working in teams, critical thinking, all of these things that really make us human. And my hope is that if we outsource the things that take away this amazing capability that we have as humans to do amazing things and give the mundane things to the machines, it frees us up to do more exciting things and actually help us evolve. And to some extent, we need this. We have so many massive problems in the world around climate change, around inequality in healthcare and education and others. Hopefully, this will enable us to address some of these challenges.
Next, we hear from Atif Rafiq, former Fortune 500 C-suite executive and author of Decision Sprint. Speaking with us in October 2023, Atif builds on this idea. He explains that while AI is vastly superior at synthesizing information, the future for knowledge workers lies in doing what machines cannot, navigating ambiguity, and expressing entirely new ideas.
Here's the thing about AI. It's just better at helping us interact with existing knowledge than people can do. And so that means people need to focus on not existing knowledge, but originating new knowledge. And I think that is where the future of knowledge workers lies. So, we should be trying to upskill and cultivate skills in our people around originating new knowledge. So we're trying to solve a problem. We have a new strategic initiative. If there's some things that we already know because we've done them before, those kinds of considerations, you're just going to ask the AI, what do we know about this? What would you think? What considerations and subject matters should we be thinking about as we're trying to solve this problem? And it can help you kind of get somewhere a little quicker, but it's not complete. And there's still going to be enough ambiguity and uncertainty where, we as people need to kind of sort through the rest of it. So what I'm trying to share here is that I think we're moving to a future where there's a distinction between administrating knowledge, which is where your AI companion will do a great job, and you should tap into it, and originating new knowledge, which is where AI is not as strong, and people are, collective intelligence of the people in your organization is really what's going to get the job done. And that requires effective collaboration between, that intelligence and the people layer.
So I've quoted something that Sam Altman from OpenAI said recently, that AI is very well suited for doing tasks, but it's not well suited for doing jobs. So for all of the fear mongering about job elimination, it's not practical. And will it be over time, over a span of decades? Maybe, but there's a lot that may happen over a span of decades. CNBC recently published a poll saying that 70% of US adults, when asked about the prevalence of AI in the workplace, said, quote, it makes them uncomfortable to interact with bots that can do human-like things. As you're out describing the decision sprint process and I imagine you're going to get an increasing volume of questions about AI and the role of AI in teams. How do you address maybe just this underlying cynicism or apprehension about how and where AI may infiltrate these decision-making processes?
Resistance and discomfort is probably a little bit of human nature because it's about disruptive change, right? I think it is very disruptive, right? Because it's essentially raising the bar on things. I mean, if you have the institutional knowledge of an organization in a corpus and you can interact with it through Gen AI and it's very conversational, that's going to change a lot, but it's something that is definitely going to happen because it's going to speed things up so much as opposed to doing 4 meetings to figure out what do we already know about this new thing that we're supposed to be, thinking through. That's going to come together very quickly. You're going to be able to assemble, the existing kind of knowledge around it super quickly. And you can look at that as a negative and resist it, or you can look at that as a positive, which just sped up my ability to do my best work. And I think that's the change. That's where things will migrate to. But I can understand how, as a workforce, we're uncomfortable with it because no one has kind of come in and taught us how to do it or show us how it works in practice. Or people are sort of navigating it, I think, as one-offs right now, and there's no like clear frame for how it works. So there's a big space here for education, for upskilling. But once we get over that hump, I think it's going to be a very different business kind of culture, so to speak, in terms of your work, your experience in the workplace.
Our next guest is Brian Elliott, executive advisor and the best-selling author of How the Future Works, leading flexible teams to do the best work of their lives. In this episode, recorded in April 2025, Brian takes aim at the outdated industrial obsession with efficiency. He challenges leaders to stop relying on monitoring and productivity theater and instead build cultures of trust by giving teams the space to experiment.
The reality is employees often see the incursion of AI in the workplace as more of a threat and maybe a violation of trust, not knowing exactly how it's going to be used for them, against them. Yeah. So there's a lot of apprehension. When you think about how to create a culture where trust is, a strength, how should employers be having the dialogue about AI as friend versus foe?
It's a great question. One of the big things is stop using the word efficiency, or at least stop just continually harping on it. If you really believe that this set of tools are augmentation to people as opposed to replacement, then you need to start using that language and talking about it in that way. By the way, the great study out of Anthropic, like in the last few weeks, that shows even in all of the classes of jobs they've looked at and tasks and everything else, they have yet to find anything that actually is full out replacement, right? So if you look at the evidence as a leader, you're not going to get there on the basis of rip and replace. So the biggest things that you need to be able to do to show if you really believe in this is we're actually going to put some effort behind training you. We're going to actually put some time on the calendar to make space for it.
When we think about bringing AI in and evaluating the right kinds of use cases, I find the most pragmatic way, I don't know if pragmatic is the word, but the best way I've seen to introduce it, into workflows is by taking it out of the shadows. Make it very clear as a culture. We celebrate experimentation, never going to get penalized for it. And to champion, bring an employee, out of the shadows into, a company forum each month and just share how you're using AI and let everyone see, we're learning together. Even leadership, we don't have all the answers.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Be a little vulnerable, but create a culture of experimentation and innovation. Have you seen that work? Is that?
Yeah, I'll give you a concrete example. A CIO of actually a big federal government agency, a guy that I happen to know fairly well, this is like a year ago, sat with his team, like top 75 folks in his organization, had them all together for an on-site in DC. And a big part of it was him sitting there going, I know that we have rules that say you're not supposed to use any of the tools except for this, cone of silence, no one's going to get in trouble. Raise your hand if you're using some of the other tools. And he raised his hand first. And he had almost everybody in the room raising their hand. He goes, okay, now let's get real. Let's get real about what we're learning, what we need to do in order to get our own internal tools to be as good as the external stuff that I know all of you were using because I've used them too. And that admission on his part, his going first, just opened up a door that otherwise would have remained closed, right? You can think about the alternative, which is the extreme of this is we've put out a policy. The policy sits in an email that says, thou shalt only use this tool over here. And we know that stuff doesn't work because we know that people who want to adopt the tools are going to go find something better on the outside. And you're going to have a shadow IT problem on your hands. He was opening up the door to a real conversation about what do we need to do, what's acceptable and not, in order to, get his team on the same page as him. And he learned a lot coming out of it too.
So obvious when you hear it that way. It seems so simple, and yet it's uncommon.
It's uncommon, and I think it's just hard for a lot of leaders to have that open conversation, right? But it's what's going to be required because it's about the emotional buy-in, right? This is EQ skills at work.
It's a different leadership skill.
Absolutely.
Than we've been taught in the past. And I think there is kind of a category of emergent leaders that are realizing that it's okay to be humble. It's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
It's different processes, different opportunities.
Yeah, one of the words I've been using because I have always been fairly open and vulnerable with my team. A lot of executives, if you say vulnerable, they have this adverse reaction, which is, oh, that's soft and hard on your sleeve and, revealing your personal turmoil, and I got a therapist for that. And the answer is no. The word fallibility might be a better one, which is, it's a big one. And this is a hard one for me to learn over the years too, which is, it's okay to not have all the answers. In fact, it's good if you say to your team, I don't have all the answers, because then you're inviting them into a conversation.
Builds trust.
Exactly. The three magic words, I don't know. And if you can say that to your team, you're asking them to, it doesn't mean that you don't have high aspirations and goals. You do. And you set those goals and you're really clear and articulate about them, but you're inviting people to help you figure out the path.
Next, we turn to Josh Dreen, co-founder of the Work3 Institute and co-author of Employment is Dead. During our conversation in January 2025, Josh shared why the traditional contract-based employment model is failing the next generation. He argued that to truly engage the modern workforce, we must move away from rigid hierarchies and create decentralized environments driven by passion and value creation.
Let's definitely dig into the AI component as we go along, but I think the foundation is work. Can we just call it out for what it is? Work is not working. It is not working for employers. It is not working for management. And it's definitely not working for frontline employees. These individuals who are the only reason they're pursuing a career, when you really think about it, is for security. They might be doing something they absolutely hate, but the reason they continue to do it day in and day out is because it does offer a nice paycheck and nice benefits. And they have, all their needs met enough to be able to spend their time doing things that they like to do outside of work on the weekends, etc. And we're starting to see that model slip away, especially for the younger generation. First and foremost, they're looking at the careers that their parents ran after, and they're like, wait, what? You did what? For 9 to 5 every day for 40 years just so that you could retire comfortably at a time where you probably can't enjoy it anymore? The concept itself doesn't resonate with the younger generation, especially when that security element is falling through the cracks for them as well. They're not seeing them retire very comfortably like what was promised. And that is truly not an option for them, as they can't afford a house. They can't afford to even put money towards a 401k. Half of the American population is living paycheck to paycheck. And that's, a majority of them can't even provide for a medical emergency of $1,000 or more. And so we're seeing this kind of if I'm doing this drudgery now and I'm not getting that security, that safety net that was promised to me, then I'm going to do something else. I'm not quite sure what it looks like and what it feels like, but Either that's exiting corporate America altogether or mixing and matching streams of income through some sort of hybrid consulting, freelancing, entrepreneurial venture, which is, again, how the younger generation was raised. They were raised watching TikToks, watching Instagram, watching an influencer set up a shop and make money by doing something that they love. And that seems way better to them than going to 4 years of college, taking on massive amounts of debt, and then not even guaranteed a job, right? Like that was the promise. And so we're seeing, the promises that have been given to us are not working anymore. And that's why we boldly declare that employment is dead. It's because it's the traditional models of work put into place during the industrial age that aren't working anymore. And understandably so. It's not the age of, the industrial age anymore. It's the age of information, the age of AI. Information moves so much more quickly. Decisions need to be made much more broadly than, the normal hierarchy of I'm a couple CEOs, the C-suite at the top of the organization who makes the decision and it trickles all the way down. We need speed and agility. And so we need to know how to empower frontline workers to make decisions, to give them that freedom and that flexibility that they're asking for. And then to bring some of that ownership to the table as well. Like if you create X amount of value for the company, you should get a piece of that at least. So we're moving away from traditional models of employment, which is contractually based, to a partnership-based employment where we value the relationship, we value the two-way communication, and those are just some of the insights from the book.
Our next voice is Linda Rottenberg, CEO and co-founder of Endeavor, and author of Crazy is a Compliment. From our archives in April 2021, Linda shared a deeply personal story about navigating her husband's health crisis while running a global organization. Her experience is a powerful reminder that the era of the superhuman leader is over, and that showing your human side is what truly earns loyalty in times of disruption.
Dan, and this is why I'm so glad you're doing this podcast, because part of the future work, I think, is everyone feeling a sense of ownership. And whether they go out and start something or whether they just approach their careers, which are, not going to be linear and are going to be completely, changing and agile and disruptive. I think that if you approach it with an entrepreneur's mindset, no matter what you want to do, I think that's how you're going to best prepare yourself, because the only thing that's going to be constant is change. And I think the fact that we see this globalization, you deal with AI and the digital disruption, these changes are not going away. And I think that I'm hopeful, again, that as hard as this last year was for so many kids in particular, that they're now going to have know that they will have the resilience to get through really, really hard things. And I think that that's the last thing I'll say, is that these entrepreneurs that you and I meet in these emerging markets, they assume it's going to be hard, right? And what's so compelling about them is they're no matter how great they are, they're still humble and hungry, because they know it's going to be hard. And I think that if everyone listening can just keep that sense of, determination, no matter what it is, and then the sense that we're going to make it easier for the next generation, that's what keeps me inspired.
You and me both. We're running out of time. I really don't want to cut this one short. I've got to ask. This is one of the questions I like to ask most of my guests is your advice for a younger version of Linda. You've accomplished so much. You've got a long road ahead. What would you do if you could roll back time?
I would say that for a long time, especially as, a young, aspiring female leader of sorts, that I aimed to be superhuman, that I thought that's the only way to get ahead. You've got to put your personal life aside. You've got to be strong and, be, tough and sort of superhuman. And when my husband, Bruce Feiler, who's an author, got diagnosed with an aggressive form of bone cancer when my girls, who are turning 16 next week, as we heard, were 3, so back in 2008, My world sort of fell apart. Luckily, Bruce survived, but it was a big ordeal. A year of chemo, his entire femur replaced with titanium rod. It was, our girls were just beginning to understand what this meant, and I really couldn't have that wall I'd created up anymore. And what happened was I was terrified that my then young employees were going to feel this was awkward and uncomfortable, and I was like losing it and being vulnerable and emotional, and they would all want to leave. And of course, the opposite happened. And I'll never forget that two of my young team members pulled me aside and they said, "You know what, Linda, you were superhuman before and totally unrelatable. And now that we see your vulnerable side, we'll follow you anywhere." And so my advice to people, my advice to my younger self is be less super, more human.
Finally, we hear from Bruce Feiler, author of 7 New York Times bestsellers, including The Search, Finding Meaningful Work in a Post-Career World. In this episode from December 2023, Bruce put our current technological shift into historical context. He reminded us that just as the Industrial Revolution fundamentally changed what it meant to be human, the AI revolution is sparking a massive work quake. His ultimate takeaway: AI can do many things, but only you can write your own story and decide what gives you meaning.
You refer to the first industrial revolution, 18th century, started in the UK, but as you indicated, those concepts really spread globally fast. For hundreds of years, we've had a very complicated relationship as humans coexisting with technology. And I'd say, I don't think it's too controversial to say we're kind of at a new all-time peak in terms of tension. I'm going to try not to bait the witness here. But, a lot, certainly in the popular press, there's a sense that AI and automation dehumanize work.
Yes.
What does Bruce Feiler think about the relationship that humans have with AI and automation?
I think the frame you have is exactly the right frame. I was asked on this, the search has just come out. I've been doing a lot of, media, and I was on television actually. And somebody asked me and said, 3,500 people last month lost their job to AI. What are we going to do in the face of this kind of massive disruption? And my answer is exactly where your question started. You cannot understand what AI is going to do to work without looking at previous changes of this magnitude in the history of work. There have been basically 4 massive changes in the history of work, right? So for most of human history, as I said, people lived where they worked and they worked where they live. And 90% of people spent 90% of their time just with subsistence, okay? And people farmed and they made their own candles and they cared for their own elders and they educated their own young. Everybody did everything, okay? And that the first big change was when, that's what I call, economy 1.0 to 2.0 occurred with the Industrial Revolution, which, as you said, started in the 18th century in Britain and really kind of reached its peak in the middle of the 19th century. So that was the change from 1.0 to 2.0. And the change from 2.0 to 3.0 essentially occurred in the middle of the 20th century when we moved from an industrial-based economy to an office-based economy, right? And, call it what you want, knowledge workers, information workers, whatever you want to do, right? From people who showered before work from people who showered after work to people who showered before work, right? So that was that big change. And the change now we have is essentially a change from, the knowledge-based economy to the networked economy, where change is happening from all corners of the globe and from all aspects of life, not least of which what's occurring with AI, generative AI, digital technology, all the things that you talk about here week in and week out. But let's go back to the Industrial Revolution. I said it in passing. A third of the population lost their jobs. And not only lost their jobs because basically there was automation now in the fields, and so therefore it didn't take as many people to harvest the crops. They then relocated to the cities. And while that was happening, there was also a fundamental change in what it meant to be human, because that corresponded, not coincidentally, but from a world in which religion and that worldview dominated into a secular world where non-religion dominated. So they were being, buffeted. They moved places, they moved jobs, they changed orientations, they changed fundamental belief systems, and not surprisingly, how they thought about work, how they thought about family, how they thought about gender relations. All of these things changed in the wake of that, okay? So what's another way of saying that? What it meant to be human changed. So now let's look at where we are in the middle of the 21st century. All these things are happening again. Okay, there's a generational change in the workforce. Now a majority of people are under 40. That's millennials and Gen Z. There's a change in gender relations going on. Okay, there's a change in the makeup of the family, right? Because you have now 80% of women working outside of the home, and you have, let's put a number on it. Let's call it 80% of dads much more involved in family life. This is a massive human experiment that we've never experienced, and no species alive has ever done this, where moms and dads are changing their roles in real time. You're having a change in back to place in where people work, right? The work from home. Even in the recent weeks, Dan, okay, you must come, Facebook, Google, on down the line. You must come to work, but only 2 days a week, or maybe 3 days a week, right? We are for information-based workers, the 5-day work week is dead and it's not coming back, because that gets to what we talked about earlier. The family dynamic and the balance, and how people want to value their children as well as their work. And then you have this massive change around AI. And I think that the technological side of this is being talked about in real time. But the human question is the one that's being ignored. What does it mean? And I'm actually just starting a new book about this, and I've been involved in some dialogue, and I think it raises a fundamental question about what it means to be alive. But there's one place where I know the answer, and that is only you can decide what kind of work you want to do. And that this is a massive workquake, is of course the word I use in my book, a massive change that we're all going through at once, that we haven't all gone through it once in 100 years. And the one thing that must happen is that everybody listening to us must ask themselves a series of questions about what kind of work they want to do and what is it that gives them meaning.
Redefining the human at work is not just a philosophical exercise, it is a business opportunity. Across these conversations, one theme stands out. The companies and individuals built to last are those that stop chasing mere efficiency and start writing a new chapter based on trust, purpose, and human connection. If any of these perspectives resonated with you, listen to the full episodes. Links are in today's show notes. And if you know someone navigating their own future of work, share this episode with them or leave a comment with your perspective. Thanks for listening to this special edition of AI and the Future of Work. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep building with purpose.
Yo, it's the end of the show, time to power it down. AI's the sis, but humans wear the crown. Team human in the house, got the vibe so clever. Dan Turchin from People Rain, making us better.
We learned about AI for humans. We're ready to conquer the future. That's all for now.
See you next time.